our sweet butter-poached Maine lobster with macaroni and cheese. One of the most famous dishes at the French Rendezvous, which has proliferated around the world. This is lobster 2.0. It's an intense process, beginning with our live lobsters here with some hot water that's heavily acidulated. Creamy lobster broth. We have a beautiful Parmesan tuile, Orzo to make our macaroni and cheese. My most favorite memories of lobster were a broiled lobster with a little ramekin of drawn butter, clarified butter with a little lemon juice in it. When I was a young cook, the way we treated lobsters in our restaurants was we would cook them in a court bouillon, which was water that was acidulated with lemon, had some herbs in it, maybe some garlic. The prerequisite for it was 7 minutes per pound. And then we would take the lobsters out of the shell, chill them down, and then use them in our recipes throughout the evening. To me, they always tasted a little off, and off meaning they weren't that memory of lobster, broiled lobster with butter that was so fond for me. So I wanted to figure out a way to remove the lobster meat when it was still raw, so we could treat it like we do our fish. We don't pre-cook our fish or anything else before we then set it in mise en place for preparation later. We cook our fish a la minute. What came of that was our ability to kill lobsters with hot water acidulated with vinegar, just distilled vinegar of no consequence. The vinegar helps the albumin in the lobster contract, so pulling it away from the shell a little bit. Of course, the hot water does the same thing. And the result of this, we're able to remove all of our lobster meat while it's still raw, or 90% raw, okay? So here we go. This is the beginning of our butter-poached lobster, which we're gonna get to a little later, but we have a lot of work to do to get there. So quickly, now we're gonna let that steep there probably for about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. You can see the shell is already starting to turn a little bit of orange. The tail is curling under, which is normal when you cook a lobster. We're gonna remove the meat from the tail, the claws, the knuckles, which we call knuckles, which actually aren't knuckles. They're the arm that attaches to the body from the claw. And I'm gonna show you a neat little trick to pull the meat out of the legs here as well. So working quickly. I mean, we all know that our lobsters, we have to buy our lobsters live. We don't wanna ever buy our lobsters that are dead. It's just not gonna be good. We're gonna take our arm, break that down to remove the claw. I'm gonna put the claw back in the water along with what we call the knuckle. Same thing on the other side. The claw requires a little more temperature than the tail does. We can remove these are incidental, the meat that we're gonna pull out of here. We're just gonna keep them in the water, make sure that they come out. We want to now save the body for the purpose of making our lobster stock, which will turn into our lobster broth. This is the tamale, which we're going to remove. We don't use it, although some people do feel it's a delicacy. We're going to go ahead and remove that, as well as the gills that are around the lobster here. We want to get rid of those as well. So this will become our lobster stock, which will then turn into our lobster broth, which becomes our base for our macaroni and cheese. We're gonna remove the tail. And now the lobster tail just pops right out of the shell. 90% raw. Take our pair of tweezers to remove the little intestine. And there we go. Same thing. Again, just repeating, removing the claw and the knuckle. We're going to take our legs off as well. Separating the tail from the body. And then I'm going to remove the outer shell from the body and pull the tamale off. The tamales is the pancreas and the liver. And then we're going to cut our gill cage off here as well. You can see these right here. The shells don't have a lot of flavor in them. I know some people do use the shell. It's really about the body, which where all the flavor is. Now we can take our claws and our knuckles and everything else out of our hot water, and we can the claw, I want to remove the bottom by turning it back and forth. And then pulling that out. Hopefully what we want to have is that cartilage comes out with it. Take our French knife, the heel of the French knife. You want to snap that and then gently pull that claw out of there. Again, the bottom claw, we're going to release that. And the purpose of that is trying to release that cartilage so we pull it out at the same time. The only negative part is you don't get the bottom piece of meat. No, we didn't get either one there, but there we go. Now we're going to then go ahead and take our knuckles and remove our meat from what we call a knuckle. And I'm cutting it on the backside because the backside is the softest area of that shell. Just splitting it in half. We used to do a knuckle sandwich at the French Laundry for a little canapé for some of our guests using this beautiful meat. Okay, so we'll just kind of snip off the ends, that joint. Okay, I'm gonna clean up a little bit here. So these are the legs, and I'm going to show you something, a lot of fun. We're going to remove the little bit of leg meat that's in here with our rolling pin. So we're just going to trim it off here at this joint. Straighten it off at that joint. Now, you saw me just do all these lobsters in hot water with my bare hands. I'm not suggesting you do with your bare hands. You know, a pair of rubber gloves may help you process the lobsters without burning your hands. Again, I'm a little used to that heat, but I just wanted to give you that little thought there so you're not trying to do it barehanded and going, wow, this is really hot, I'm burning myself. We're just gonna take a rolling pin, kind of push down on it, and watch that meat just come out of there. It's something fun, a little parlor trick. Just pressing down on the rolling pin, using the rolling pin to crush the leg and push it on up, and then that'll extract that little bit of leg meat. Okay, and there we have it. Here's our lobster carcass, which we're going to now turn into our lobster stock. Lobster broth, one of my favorites. Soups, could be a sauce, it just does wonderful things. We have cleaned our lobsters already. We have our lobster carcass now. We've rinsed them off so that they're nice and clean. We're gonna go ahead and cut them in pieces about 1 inch by 1 inch. These are Maine lobsters, of course. And a great old dear friend who's, rest in peace, Ingrid Benjes, was our lobster supplier from Stonington, Maine for years, and actually still is. Her company still lives on. We continue to get lobsters from her every day. We want to expose as much surface as possible to extract as much flavor as we can. It's really all about that lobster flavor. And again, one of the things that we love about the way we've cleaned our lobsters is the carcass, the meat is almost raw. And therefore, we can treat it in the same way we do our veal stock or our chicken stock, lamb stock. And we always start with raw bones. We never have any of that kind of pre-cooked flavor that I was so used to as a young chef. We get that nice fresh lobster. We have our sautoir, right? We're gonna add a little bit of oil. We always cook with vegetable oil, so whenever I say oil, it's always gonna be that vegetable oil. We would never use any other oil to cook with, olive oil. No, we're gonna use a high flash point oil, canola, coconut, avocado, grapeseed. These are the kind of oils that we use as our workhorse. They don't have a lot of flavor to them, which we don't want to have. They're very neutral in flavor, and of course act as that cooking vehicle. So heated our pan, we're going to add our lobster body, or lobster, like I like to say, lobster carcass. Okay. And we're just going to, just get these slightly cooked, not a whole lot. We have 4 lobsters here, and I can immediately smell. It almost smells like Maine. I'm going to add our tomato, chopped tomato. Our sweet carrots, our tarragon, and our water. We're going to bring that up to a simmer. I'm going to always set my stocks off center of the fire, which allows me to skim off the impurities as they start to rise. The heat pushes them to one side. So when I'm skimming, it's all the impurities are collecting on one edge. So we're gonna go ahead and let that simmer for 45 minutes, and then we're gonna strain it, reduce it to our lobster glass before we cream it out to make our lobster broth. Beautiful, our lobster stock has been simmering for 45 minutes. We've skimmed it. You can see how beautiful this is now. It's very clear. It's almost like a lobster consommé. But we're gonna go ahead and strain it. And when we strain it, we're gonna actually crush the bodies to extract even more of that lobster flavor. And of course, we wanna also crush the vegetables, which give us the sweetness, and the tomatoes, which are gonna give us that beautiful orange color that we recognize in our lobster stock. And then ultimately in our lobster broth. I wish you could smell this. Again, the aromas that I want you to be able to appreciate while you're cooking. gives you another sense of appreciation for being a chef and being a cook, and of course, then the products that we're using. Okay, so you can see that I'm pushing through all of that, the bodies, the vegetables, the flavor from the tarragon. You can see that. Now, I'm not going to take that out because as I add more liquid, it will also filter some more of those beautiful flavors down into my lobster stock. All those wonderful juices from the vegetables and the lobster bodies. You can see how crushed up they are. That's what we want to do. All right. We're just going to discard that. We're going to strain this again through a chinois or fine mesh strainer before we put it back on the fire to reduce and prepare our lobster broth by reducing this to a lobster glace. I never push on a fine mesh strainer. Always treat them very gently. Bring that back over to our fire. And I'm gonna offset it in the same way I've done our stock. If there are any more impurities that are in the stock, we'll force them to one side to be able to skim off very easily. The reason we don't force anything through a fine mesh strainer, because they're very fragile and we don't want to rip the screen from the frame. And I've seen that happen dozens of times, or accidentally poke a hole through the mesh. Okay, our lobster stock is reducing. We're gonna get to our final step on our butter-poached Maine lobster. With creamy lobster broth, we have a beautiful Parmesan tuile, Orzo to make our macaroni and cheese, mascarpone is our cheese component, but first we're gonna make our beurre monté. So we're gonna emulsify butter to the point where it's liquid, but it's still emulsified. So beurre monté is actually emulsified butter. We're gonna make this butter here become liquid, but still maintain the properties of whole butter. In other words, it's not going to separate. It's not going to become clarified. We're going to get the whey. We're not going to get the milk solids. It will be a liquid butter. So in this form, we're going to add a little bit of water to help us with the emulsification. And the butter is really cold, which is good. I've got a whisk here. So we're just going to start whisking our pieces of butter into our water here. Now, sometimes you've seen beurre blanc sauces, which is a reduction of white wine vinegar, shallots, and white wine emulsified with butter. It's the same principle. It could become part of a sauce later as well, beurre monté. You can flavor it with almost anything you want. The reason we're making it is because we're actually going to poach our lobster, finish cooking our lobster in our beurre monté. My memories of lobster was always about that beautiful broiled lobster with the drawn butter. This is the closest thing I come to having that flavor. Actually, it's even better than that flavor. We're continuously adding this while we're whisking it. There's no real rule in how much to add or when to add it. So we're going to continue to add it as we want. We don't want to dump this whole thing in there, obviously. We want it to be melting at the same time we're adding new cubes. We don't have to wait for each cube to melt before we add the next. You can see that there are several cubes in there at a time at different degrees of liquid. Once we've started our beurre monté, we can maintain that emulsification and add 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 4 pounds, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds of butter to this and continue to whisk it in, and it'll maintain an emulsification as long as it does not get too hot. If it gets too hot, then of course it'll separate. In our restaurant and in most places, we're using sweet butter. We never want to use salted butter. Salted butter was actually made during World War II or before to preserve butter, to give it a longer shelf life. Today, we always want to use fresh, sweet butter. And if we want to season it, if we want to add salt or vinegar or lemon juice or anything to it, we can always do that later. And we know the quality of the salt that we're putting in the butter. So it's never a question of buying salted butter or not. We just don't consider it as something that's appropriate for what we're doing in our kitchens. We're almost there. I'm turning it down a little bit. Now, the trick to this is to maintain the consistent temperature while your lobsters are cooking. Just gonna add a little more water. One thing here which we have to understand is it's a very luxurious dish. We've put a whole pound of butter in here. In our restaurant, we would continue to probably put 19 more pounds of butter in there to be able to use for our service for lobster that night. I'm gonna add a little more water to give me a little more volume without using more butter because I wanna be considerate of the cost of our ingredients for all of us at home. I'm gonna season it aggressively because this is what's gonna season our lobsters. It is salty. It's at a beautiful temperature right now. I'm gonna go ahead and switch the burner on this and put it up front and go ahead and put our lobsters into our beurre monté to begin cooking, or poaching, as we call it, poaching in beurre monté, or, as we all know, butter-poached lobster. Remember, we have our lobster here. It's about 10% cooked. We've got our claws. We'll go ahead and add them to our beurre monté. Our claws will lie in there. We've trimmed them a little bit, so we made them a little more aesthetically appealing by trimming some of the shards that we pull them out of the claw. We've also trimmed our lobster tail just slightly so it can sit flat. We're gonna go ahead and do our orzo. This is our creamy lobster broth. I know when I say broth, most of us think of something that's clear, but we've taken our lobster broth, reduced it to a lobster glass, and added cream to it, so we call it a creamy lobster broth. We heat that. We're maintaining a temperature on this without boiling it. Moving our lobster around a little bit in there. I'm not necessarily tasting it as much as I'm getting the temperature of it. The most sensitive part of your body for temperature are your lips, your tongue. So that's why I'm tasting it, making sure that I've got that right temperature, doesn't get too hot. I'm also watching it very carefully because I never want to see it start to simmer. If it does start to simmer, though, just put a little water in there. It'll cool it down right away. Okay, so we're gonna reduce this. We're gonna be cooking that in our butter. We've got our orzo here, which we blanched off, and of course, our mascarpone cheese, some snipped chives to finish the dish with, give it that little bit of sharpness from something that comes from the onion family. A couple more minutes here. Okay. We'll go ahead and add our orzo now. Our creamy lobster broth. You could use any pasta you like. We like orzo because of the size, because of the way it plates. It's easy to keep it focused in a specific area on your plate. There's no reason why you couldn't use elbow macaroni or even spaghetti if you wanted to. Remember, we call it macaroni and cheese, but we're not really using macaroni. We are using orzo. I'm gonna add my mascarpone cheese. Remember, because we are cooking our pasta in our broth, our creamy lobster broth, we only want it done about a third of the way so that we can continue to cook it in the broth, and thus the orzo itself really capturing and absorbing the flavor of the lobster broth. Again, this is a very, very luxurious, very rich dish. You want to be careful. You don't really want to do this too far ahead of time. As you know, the longer it sits, the more that pasta is going to absorb that lobster broth. So you want to be able to cook it, add your orzo, finish cooking it in the broth, and then serve it. The starch in the orzo, as it continues to cook, really tightens up that lobster broth. Beautiful. I'm just feeling them. It's interesting, lobsters are very, very difficult to cook. So you really have to kind of work with it and understand it. If it's overcooked, it's a little tough. If it's undercooked, it's a little tough. It's a protein that wants to be just barely opaque in the center. So I'm feeling it for the density. Now you can see that right there. So this one I can feel is beautiful. So I'm just barely pressing it and feeling the resistance in the tension of the meat. This one's just slightly bigger. It's a little more underdone than this one, if you could see. So I'll just drop that back in for another moment. Okay, I think we're there. Reheat that slightly. My chives. Mix them up. Now you see that, it's almost like a risotto. A little creamier than what risotto would be. That's what we really are kind of looking for. I'm gonna go ahead and drain my lobster tail. And 2 claws. Season them tightly. Beautiful. We're just gonna add a Parmesan tuile. Again, remember this is macaroni and cheese. We made these in our first masterclass, as you remember, so there we go. Lobster macaroni and cheese.